Hello guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make your very first project in Java. Now before we start writing our program, there has to be few keywords that you have to understand. When you write program, depending on the complication of the program, you could have so many items involved. As an example, you could have files to go with the program, you have libraries, you have assets, you have configuration, you may have references, you have API documents, examples, maybe test cases to test your own code, build scripts to make a build. Now all of these items, they may have a dependency on each other, and as a user you don't want to load yourself with all these complication and making sure that all dependencies are met. So project is a tool to let you organize all that without too much of an effort. So you just follow certain rules and project will just keep all of them very well contained, and it tracks dependency itself. If I just show you an example of a simple software project, it has class and it has interdependency between the class. It could have class extending other classes, or it could have an interface applied to the classes. It could have a method and fields inside the class that it needs to track. So project just keeps all that together and it just maintains it all for you. So it just makes your life easy. Now let's look at what is class. So class is nothing but a blueprint. That means whenever you want to create an actual item, you don't use that class as an item. You just use the blueprint and create a similar model and then use that model as an item. So let's look at it with an example. So here I have an example of a tree class. There is a class called tree in the memory, and when a user creates the object or instance of the class, it creates another two similar size memory location, and depending on the parameter provided by the user, it will create different objects from the same class. So the main class is just treated as a blueprint, it doesn't get touched. And when the use for the object is finished, the JVM then just recollects that memory and destroy that object. So it's free for the next object. If you look at the second example, so if I have a class called person, I can create an object of a person class and then assign each object a name. That means now I have a three object with a different name. So now you guys know what class is and what object means. So let's look at what is a static method. Static method is the method which could be part of the class and it cannot have its instance or the object. So it remains static throughout the life cycle. What does it mean? So let's say if I have a class called student, I can create the objects of the class. On the screen I have a student class which takes a name and age as a parameter. So when I create three different objects of the student, I can give each one a separate name and separate age. But you would notice that there is a method called school code which is assigned static. Static means you cannot have instance of that variable. That means each of these three objects that I have created, school code would remain common across them. So if you change school code value to a different one, it will be applied to all three objects because that is the static method and you won't have a separate instance for each object. So this is the word static means. Now one thing you have to remember, that static methods are compiled before even program start executing other methods. So that means static methods are available before even any object creation takes place. In upcoming slides you will know why I'm mentioning that. So let's talk about main method. So what is main method? Now when you write any program doesn't know where to start. If you have hundreds of classes, I mean which class program starts from? So you have to provide a starting point for any program. So in a Java they use main method, so it has to be exactly same syntax as specified on the screen. It will have to be written like public static void main and then argument as in a string, and then you can write any subsequent methods following that in the curly brackets. So let's understand each of those keywords that mentioned there. So the first keyword is public. Public method means it's available across the project, so anyone can call that method and it gets used. This particular function is available even though there might not be instance of class is made, because when you first start a program might not be any instance created for any of the class because it's just the very first starting point. So that method has to be static, so JVM can straight away execute that. Void, obviously because it's a very first starting point, there is no one to look after any return value. So rule is we do not return anything to JVM because JVM wouldn't know what to do with it. So it has to be set as a void. Void means nothing. And the method name has to be main with all lower cases. So you cannot change those rules, otherwise JVM would not like it. So keep that method exactly how it is described here. Now you guys know what is a main method, what is class, what is object, what is instance, and what is a static method. Now you will need all of this information when I will show you how to write your first program in your very first project. So to start with our first project, open your Eclipse IDE. Now you would notice that when you open Eclipse IDE, it will be default arrangement, which is as shown on the screen. I personally don't like all of these tabs open because it just clutters my screen and I can't see everything I want to see. So I personally prefer to close some of the tabs that I don't generally use. Again, it is my personal preference, so if you think no, you want to keep eye on all those tabs, then please leave it open. If you have by mistake closed any of these tabs, then you can always go to Windows, Perspective, and then click on Reset Perspective, and it will bring all your tabs back. So don't worry if you click something by mistake, you can always recover it. To start with our very first project, so you need to click on File, click New, and then you will be shown lots of options. Select a Java project. Project name could be anything, but preferred is some useful name, because what happens that while you are starting you can give it any name like test1, test2, blah blah blah. But when you start writing a real program, and if you start using such a name, then it will become really hard to know what that program does later on, and then you have to remember all that. So get into habit of providing some useful name. So in my case I'll be just calling it tutorial1 because it makes sense. There are other few information here which you don't need to worry about right now, just leave it as default. The only thing you need to worry about is it's pointing to correct JRE that you have installed. Click next button. Now here it will show you the default structure it will create for your project. So what it will do, it will create a directory called tutorial1 in your workspace, which is your default location that you have selected during the start of the Eclipse program, and it will create a directory called source file. This is where all of your source is going to go, and inside that, as you see, there is currently nothing. Now it also shows you where your compile class is going to go, so it will end up in a bin directory currently. I would say leave it as a default and click finish. So once you have a default project structure appear on your screen, make sure you are in a package explorer, because sometimes people end up with a few different tabs here and then they don't find the structure represented similar to my one. So before we progress ahead, I just want to make sure that a few Eclipse settings that I use is similar to yours. Otherwise what will happen that when you will be following my tutorial, you would see a different result and you'll be questioning why it's behaving differently. So let's look at those settings first. So if you click on this drop down menu and go to package presentation, please make sure you have selected hierarchical. Now by default it might be flat. If you prefer that way, that's fine. I prefer hierarchical so I can see all subdirectory and the classes and all the dependency in a tree structure. The other thing I would like to show you is if you go into preference window, go to general tab, go to editor and select text editor, and make sure your show line number tick box is ticked. These will show you all the line numbers against your code. So when I mention look at line number 3, you know which line I'm talking about. Once you have done that, I would suggest to go to Java tab, select the code style, click on formatter and then click edit on the formatter. Now provide your name here. I have provided my own name, Arpit Shah, and then go to tab called line wrapping, and instead of 40, which is a default, you can set it to 150. So I prefer this particular number because it keeps all my program within a one line and doesn't wrap it just because it meets the maximum. And because I've closed all the other tabs, it just shows me a nice clean program. Otherwise it looks like a very lengthy coding. Once you have done all that, click OK to save everything. So there you go. Now we have created our very first project and we are ready to write our first program. So to write a program, I have just already explained you what class is, and we have to start with a class of some sort, and then we have to provide a main method so program know the starting point. So let's give it a class. So let's right click on the source directory, select a new and select a class. Now class name also supposed to be logical names, so if you know the action that your class will be performing, then you provide that name. If your class has a specific purpose, then use that as a class name. Now there are preferred guidelines on how to provide a naming convention to class. So if I type Arpit, you would notice that ID warns me that that's not the preferred naming convention. So you should always start your class name with a capital character. So let me call my class main for now. The reason why I'm calling it main, because I am going to have main method within this class, and this class would not have any other purpose than just execute main method and then call the other class from that. Again, in a big project you might not want to call it main. You give it a more appropriate name. So let's keep that main for now. Now ID also helps you with some other shortcuts. So either you can write your main method yourself after creating class, or you can just tick this checkbox here. So when you click finish, you will see that ID provides you the main method already. So yeah, that helps sometime, because then you don't have to remember the syntax of the main class. So now that we know we have a main class, let me just add some console output here. So when we execute program, we can see that it's doing something. So I'm just calling it hello world for now. Okay, so here we go. Now we have our main method. We have our very first execution line, which will just print hello world on the console screen. As we can see, ID is not showing any errors. So let's execute and make sure that our program actually runs. So as you notice, I have left my console window open. If you don't have it, you can go to window, perspective, and reset your perspective. Then you will see the console window. The other option is, if you just want to view the console, you can go to show view and then click on console and it will pop up as well. So once you have console window appearing, you can click on the run main. Now if you use that method, you have to make sure that the class is selected and then click that, and it will ask you, do you want to compile and run? You say okay, and as you see, the hello world is printed on my screen. Now that's not the only way to execute your program. You can also select your main class, right click and select run as a Java application, which essentially do the same thing, and as you can see, it again printed hello world. So there you go guys, you wrote your very first program which prints something on the screen, and I'll be showing you more in-depth programming in our next tutorials. So if you want to stay up to date with all my next videos, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.